FDIC. It's our pleasure having on the state senator who's the chairman of Senate Appropriation, Briggs Hopson. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I am great, Paul. How are you this morning?
It's good to have you. I have no idea how you've escaped this program for so long.
Well, it's been a while.
Yes.
It's been a few years since I've been on the program, but it's good to be back with you.
Well, you know, your PR people, Easterling and flags over there always help. So.
Yeah, they can run interference for me from Vicksburg, and they do quite a good job with it. And let me stop and commend our mayor and our board of supervisors here in Vicksburg and Warren County, respectively, for the fine job that they're doing with this pandemic. We've had a little bit of a spike here in Warren County, but unfortunately that's due to the outbreak at the Grand Gulf facility. So unfortunately that's affected our numbers in Warren County, but I'm real pleased with the job that the mayor and the board of supervisors are doing to try to keep us safe here.
Briggs, we had 327 reported yesterday. It doesn't seem, if we're looking for the spike, it doesn't seem like it's hit yet.
Well, I'm not keeping up with the daily numbers as much as, of course, Thomas Dobbs is and others that are looking at the daily numbers. But we are in a position where, again, it could be worse. But I think the big thing that I keep hearing is we're not overloading our healthcare facilities, and we've kept the curve flat, or flatter, as they say, to make sure we don't get inundated with claims and inundated with folks coming in to the emergency rooms and hospitals and where they can't be treated.
You know, it's a wonderful time. You are so lucky to be a Senate Appropriation Chairman at this particular time, isn't it?
I detect some cynicism in that comment, Paul.
Dutifully so.
The crazy thing about it, Paul, is we walked into this session having record revenues in Mississippi, and we were having such a great year, and then, of course, this pandemic hit, and everything's turned around, and it's just one of the things you have to deal with from time to time, but it's changed from a really rosy outlook to a very difficult and testing outlook, because we're getting ready to look at economic numbers here soon, and indications are not so good for the past month.
Well, if we lost, $225 million for the month of April over projections, is that what it was?
Last count I had was $240 million, but it may have gone down a bit because some money sometimes lags coming in.
Yeah.
So it's probably in excess of $220 million, and I think we'll get a final count on that relatively soon. So, you're talking about in excess of $200 million in 1 month, and I think all the listeners can do the math on that and see what an impact that's going to have on our state for this fiscal year, but then also you've got to kind of forecast that out for next fiscal year, which starts July the 1st.
And you guys haven't actually done the appropriation yet. I mean, when you get back May the 18th, and I think the Speaker said over in the House that may be there for the full month, if that's possible. So are you? I'm sure you guys are talking between you and Chairman over in the House, but you're going to have to put some numbers on the table that nobody wants to put on as far as the ultimate numbers as far as appropriations concerned.
Yeah, no question, Paul. I think here's what makes it difficult, and some of the listeners understand this because they've been involved in this process, but for those that don't, the way we set our budget for the next fiscal year is based on the information that we receive from the economist, the state economist, Darren Webb, along with our revenue commissioner, Herb Frierson, and a few others that we come in together, and then, as you know, the joint LBC will get together at some point. That is co-chaired by the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor, and there will be 5 members from each chamber, and we will sit down and look at those numbers, talk about projections, and then we're going to have to base our 2021 budget on what we think a reasonable revenue estimate is. And early indications are not good, but I think one of the benefits of coming in late in the session is that we should have a little bit better forecasting model to look at, so that we can try to hit the mark. Because the difficulty in that whole process is if you set it too high, of course, you could end up with the governor making cuts throughout the year, which nobody wants. But if you set it too low, essentially you're leaving money on the table, so to speak, with the agencies that need to be administering the programs and putting out the product for the citizens of the state. So it's going to be a tough year. I mean, it really is going to be a difficult year. But I think we're up to the task, and I'm looking forward to the challenge of trying to make this as good as possible.
Let's get to the matters at hand and this fight that's going on between the House and Senate and the governor's office. You served with the Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves, now governor. What do people need to know about Tate Reeves that you've learned, and you've served with him for a while?
he's a great guy and a super competent governor. I'm very confident in his abilities as a governor. I worked with him, as you said, for 8 years. Worked closely with him for a long time, and he's very, very thoughtful in what he does, and just. I consider him a friend. He's probably not real happy with me right now, Paul, but I do consider the governor, Tate, a good friend and someone whom I think highly of and respect tremendously.
Well, he was headstrong as a lieutenant governor, and I think we had Robert Johnson said it yesterday. He was on the air with me. And he said, and everybody knows this in those politics, you can't be the same person as lieutenant governor in arguably one of the more powerful positions in state government. And arguably also, inarguably, one of the weaker is the governor's position. You can't have that same personality and be as headstrong in one or the other. Building relationship as governor is different than being lieutenant governor.
Certainly there are different duties and responsibilities in the way that our government is set up, and the lieutenant governor, as you well know, Paul, is going to be strong in the policy-making area of state government, and of course the executive branch and the governor, who's the head of the executive branch, is going to be responsible for administering the policies and the programs and the funds that are set by the legislature. So it's unique in this state. I mean, every state's different. I've learned that. I knew that before, but I've learned it even more so in this whole process that we're dealing with now.
Well, you're a lawyer, and a good one. You have to bring people together. What do you suggest? And I mean, as someone who is a public servant serving the people of the state, what do you suggest? How can we get this thing over and get it done?
Well, I guess you mean how can we get the dilemma between the legislature and the governor over as with respect to the CARES Act funds?
That and just the personalities that are bouncing against each other now. I mean, because whatever happens here, chances are, if we don't solve this, the next issue that's come up, the next issue that comes up is going to be as bad.
Well, let me address the personality part first. I think that's important because this is Briggs. This is my sentiment about how this should be handled. And look, this is my 13th year now in the legislature, and so I've been around a lot of different people, and I think one of the things that I admire most about those that serve in political positions is the ability to work hard on issues in which we feel strongly about and believe in, but never make it personal. I never want to make anything personal. And I can tell you, as closely as I work with the governor when he served in the LG role, we had some disagreements. I mean, we had some significant disagreements, and he was upset with me at times, and I probably was a little upset with him in the sense that we disagreed on a policy matter. But I never wanted that to get personal. I never let it get personal. And it's the same way with my colleagues in the Senate and the House. I mean, I've had disagreements with many of them, but I never let it get personal because the last thing you want to do is burn a bridge that's going to prevent you from getting the best product out there for the state of Mississippi later. So even if we might disagree on this issue, I don't want to ever, and I'm not going to, I promise you, I'm not going to ever let it get to a point where I just can't work with somebody else because I know that the best thing for the state of Mississippi is for us to work together. So, putting aside that personality part, that's just my sentiment. Now, I can't say that for everybody. Some people, if you push them to a point or they feel like they've been personally attacked, sometimes that's the end of it for them, and that's a difficult thing.
Listen, I can relate to that because the same thing applies on the air here, where there are some people who understand it's not personal, it's just pushing to get some answers, and some of them they get their feelings hurt and they'll never come back on. I call it, we need to go back to the old sun and sand policy, where what stays on the floor, what happens on the floor stays on the floor, and we can go to the sun and sand and talk it out. But
that's right, Paul. And I think that's one of the benefits. I know some of your listeners probably aren't crazy about attorneys, but I love my profession and think that there are a lot of great people in that profession that do good for our folks. But one of the good things about the training in the legal profession is you learn to fight your battle in the courtroom, and you should at least walk out of the courtroom at the end of the day. It's kind of like a ball game. You shake hands with the opponent, and you move on, and that's the way I look at it in politics.
We got to get back to that. Let me play this because this is something that I need to, when we come back, to ask you, because the governor said in a press conference yesterday that you guys may have done what you did in error as a mistake or illegal, and if anybody can answer that, would be the appropriation chair. And as we noted, attorney Briggs Hopson, we'll get to that when we come back about that one. Let me get back to the chairman of Appropriation in the Senate. It's Briggs Hopson, Vicksburg Way, representing Issaquena, Warren, and Yazoo County. You know, we were talking about Issaquena County, which is an unusual county. And Briggs, I've often thought there are people who say, I'm going to go off the grid. I'm on a move to Alaska someplace. Why would you do that? Go to the state that's got the best cost of living, and you can get off the grid in Issaquena County. Probably buy some land out there. Floods every once in a while, but other than that.
Would love to have everybody come over to Issaquena County. And
yes.
I think, Paul, you may know this, that I'm fairly certain that Issaquena is still, as of yesterday, the only county in the state of Mississippi without a COVID-19 coronavirus case. So, you know, of course, most of you that know anything about Issaquena County know that it's very rural and great farming and agricultural and hunting and fishing land in that county, and I'm proud to represent it. So I'm glad they're staying safe in Issaquena County. And,
well, I've often said
come on over and see us in this area. It's
the poster county for libertarians who don't like tax incentives for major corporations. So I'll leave it at that. There's not a lot of that's been conducted. But, I mean, it's a beautiful place. It really is. And really I've been over many times as far as the woods and the river over in that area. All right, I want to play this for you because this is something in his news conference yesterday.
The fact is, when the legislature rushes back on less than 1 day's notice, don't read the bills, they make mistakes. In fact, I believe they made a real big mistake. At this point, they really haven't even sent us a bill. They've sent us a piece of paper. Now, I've heard repeatedly that they claim that all of this is about the Mississippi Constitution. Well, the Mississippi Constitution says a lot of things. One of the important rules it sets forward is the requirement of the legislature to spend 1 full day in session such that every legislator gets the right to reconsider their actions. They cannot send a bill to me unless they do so.
All right, so the availability of those who are in disagreement to hold that on a motion to reconsider was not granted according to the Constitution. Your statement on that?
Well, there are a couple of things here. First of all, that there was a request, a motion made for immediate release, which is frequently done, has been done many, many times, too many to count over my tenure in the legislature, and the motion was made for immediate release, and that means that if anybody wants to hold it over, they can make their objection at that time. Otherwise, that it is going to be released from your chamber and move on either to the other chamber or to the governor's office. You know, we're in unprecedented times, Paul. This is we've had to come in. In fact, if you look back to what we did before we first suspended the session, I'm fairly certain that, I haven't looked back, but I'm fairly certain that day we passed a bill and on the payment for city, county, and public school district employees to continue their pay with administrative leave. I'm fairly certain that was done on the last day. We did an immediate release, and the governor signed that bill, that measure. So, you know, that has been done many, many times. Now, because of the uncertainty of the time that we're in, I think everybody consider this the last day before the suspension. But if there's an issue there, I'm sure legal staff can look at that and tell us, and that's easily resolved if there is a problem, and that is you're back in session. We're going to be back in session soon. We can be back in session at any time, as we did this last time. So I don't see that as a big stumbling block.
Well, but it is time sensitive, isn't it, Briggs? Because you got to do it by Thursday.
Yeah, if the governor vetoes it, then I think it's a moot point. If you're talking about the Thursday veto.
Well, what if he doesn't, and he leaves it on his desk, and then he says, and he's already said that in that audio, that it's not a bill, it's just a piece of paper.
Well, he signed the last bill, I think, that we passed to him a couple of weeks ago, so it's, you know, if that was the case, maybe, you know, he shouldn't have signed. But this is done commonly, Paul, and again...
Well, I understand it's done commonly, but what I'm saying is when you get to the letter of the Constitution itself, is it an arguable point that would give him some leeway if and when this thing goes to the state Supreme Court?
if that is the case, and if legal counsel for the legislature were to say that they think that needs to happen, then certainly we could come back in. I know the lieutenant governor has signaled that if in fact that is an issue, that's not a problem to rectify that. That's not my call to make on whether we come back in, but that's certainly something that could be done if that becomes a legal issue.
I got you. Here's the rest of
Mississippi Senate must come back. Give senators the right before Thursday. Give senators the right to hold that motion on reconsider. Or I would submit to you that it is not properly before the governor. They didn't do that. They rushed in, they rushed out, they left town, and they want to wait weeks before they come back to start the process of budgeting the CARES Act. They said that they may come back as soon as May the 18th. That's 2 weeks from today. That means that they haven't debated or discussed any of the items that we want to do to get money in your hands quickly.
All right. For you as the appropriation chairman, would you address your thoughts on the immediacy of how available those funds would be, and are there immediate needs within that $1.2 billion that you, as appropriation chairman, and also with your counterparts over in the House, be able to get this money out to where it needs to be on an immediate basis?
Sure. Well, there are a lot of things to address on that. One is that I think we've proven in the past that we can move nimbly and we can be in. And as I said on the floor, the governor could call us back in if he needed to, but I don't think there's any need to. First, but I'll tell you why in just a second. Mm-hmm. But also the lieutenant governor and the speaker can call us back in as well. And the reason I say I don't think there's an immediate need is one, we've been in close contact with the agencies. We've got a list of those who have said that they may need money as a result of this pandemic, and we've got that list. And we've asked the question, do you need any money right now? Most, if not all of which, has said no, we don't need anything right now. Having said that, we left $100 million. In this bill, there was $100 million that was left in DFA that the governor and Liz Welch, who's the interim head of DFA, can access at any time for any agency. And I think the other thing that people have to keep in mind, Paul, and this is an important part that gets overlooked frequently in this debate, is actually there was about $2.3 billion that was sent to the state. The 1.25 was one pocket that was sent to the state of Mississippi. And, Paul, you know when the state gets the money, the legislature is supposed to appropriate it. But having said that, there was another almost $1.1 billion that was sent to, and there's a list, and I rattled this list off on the Senate floor. The governor got a pocket of money for education. MDE got a pocket of money. I'm talking $170 million almost. IHL got about $150 million. DHS got money. MEMA got money. Secretary of State got money. MDOT. I mean, I could keep going. There's so many other groups and agencies in our state that got money to address their needs, or many of their needs, and to the extent that that need was not met in that $1.1 billion, we've got $100 million sitting there for the governor and DFA to access for any of our agencies right now.
But Briggs, the disbursement of that, the language was different, where, in other words, the governor could use that money but not this money?
Well, the language that we've got for those different agencies, it would say, for instance, and I'm just giving you kind of a rough scenario, that IHL could use money for the offset of losses they sustained as a result of expenses for the COVID-19, and certainly they have sustained some losses. MDE, same thing. There's certain money that went to MDES for various things. So they can ask, we have not touched their escalation authority in the law, so they can escalate. In other words, they can draw those funds, those federal funds down. They're over. Or if they're not in DFA, they will be at DFA. They can draw them down from DFA to address those specific needs. And if they've got a need on top of that qualifies for the CARES Act and meets the Treasury regulations, they can then access those funds too.
You know, the governor's point on this one, that I've got to go to the legislature to get that money in a time of emergency, which is too cumbersome. They would have to call a special session. And how do you address that?
Well, there's $100 million sitting there right now that if somebody needs it, that he can go to. Yeah. And again, he he can pull us back in quickly. But
real quick.
Right now, we don't see $100 million for anybody that's saying they need that immediately.
One more question here. Is the money going to be through an RFQ? And is that, I think that's tomorrow, where that's going to be given out, awarded?
I think that was the governor's plan, is to hire some administrator to send the money out to the different agencies.
Are you challenging that?
When you say challenging, Paul, what do you mean?
Are you in disagreement with that?
Well, I think I'm in disagreement.
Could you hold on, because that's an important part, and I want you to hold on for a second. And I hate to ask him to do this, but Perez, would you do it? We'll get to that point, and all right, here goes. Let me get back to because I know he's busy and he's got to go, but I thank you for holding on, sir. Briggs Hopson, who is the state senator and also the Senate Appropriations chairman. And so it's the by the way, and I hate to sound dumb here, but I've always called them RFPs, requests for proposals. And I think 3 or 4 times people have mentioned to me RFQs. Can you tell me what the hell the difference is?
Well, the I'm not an expert at procurement and those things, Paul, but RFQ, request for qualifications, and I think what essentially they do in the RFQ is they set up a matrix of items that they're going to look at to see if you qualify, and they'll give percentages to each of the categories, and if you meet this criteria, then you will get 25%. You meet this one, you get 15%, and so forth. So I think that's the difference.
But the RFQ, that's quantification. So the RFQ doesn't supplant the RFP.
Well, I think the RFQ is the process where you get somebody, and again, I'm not an expert, but I think that's when you're going to get someone who meets these qualifications, the best person, and it's not based on just a plain number. It's based on all these different.
In other words, not the lowest bidder, but the most apt person who's qualified to do this.
That's
okay.
Probably a good way to summarize it.
So talk about this process. Where are we? What's the wishes of the Senate? Are they the same as the House that you would rather find? Because what we're talking about is bringing in $1.2 billion, and at a time when people don't even know if they're going to be able to turn their, after the moratorium is over from some of the gas companies, we have people wondering if their gas is going to be turned off because they haven't paid for that, or they don't have a job and the money's run out, and we got $40 million going to somebody in a private sector to just handle the disbursement of other tax dollars?
Yeah, I don't know if there was something about $40 million going to someone.
Well, I heard it was 3%. If it's 3% of the total, then that would put it at 36. And if it's 3.5%, it's even more.
Yeah, I think that what I envision and what I've talked to some other members of our chamber and the House about is what we would do. And I've met with the state auditor, met with him yesterday, as a matter of fact, and talked about having the state auditor. And they may have to contract out some of the work, but we've talked about a number that
Well, he was with me a few moments ago, and you should know that he says he can't do it legally. He can't be the disbursement of that. He can only audit it.
He would do the auditing. That's correct. Now, the disbursement would be done through either, depending on how it's done, DFA. And let me back up for a second, Paul. When I look at this, there are two different angles, two different avenues to travel for disbursement. One is primarily public sector. And if you look at the COVID-19 list of things, expenses that can be reimbursed, and you've got all the agencies and the things like medical expenses, public health expenses, payroll expenses for those that have been mitigating or responding to COVID-19. And then there's kind of a catch-all section that deals with things like food delivery and distance learning, telework, et cetera, telehealth. All those things, state prisons, those will be kind of what I consider, public sector, state government. Then there's another sector that deals with, and this is something that I think is important, it deals with the grants to small businesses to reimburse them their costs for business interruption caused by the closures. And then part of that is also our state and local government. I mean, our county and local governments. I mean, there's some expenditures there for payroll support, and maybe one or two other things that are included as well. So I think that you can look at this in different ways. Auditing will be done by our state auditor, and that'll be a big savings, I think. And then DFA, and we may have to use, and I've been told you can use some of the CARES Act funds to support either like DFA. That's probably the most likely area for it to go. And then the agencies will pull out of DFA like they always do through the escalation process. And then you could have another agency, maybe MDA is the best place. We've had some debate on that, but then you could have that for the business reimbursements. But I think it'd be a tremendously less than if, in fact, the number is around $40 million to administer that. I think it'd be way, way, way less than that number. And that way you've got more money that's going out to the people and the agencies that need it, the people in the state, the citizens, and all instead of going to administration.
Certainly if it's $40 million. But one other question, final question here.
Yes, sure.
If the governor says, well, wait a minute, Briggs, you guys sent me a piece of paper. You did not send me a legally binding bill for me to sign or to veto one way or the other. You guys left, and it's an incomplete process. Well, then wouldn't it stand to reason that the signing of any RFQs tomorrow, May the 6th, if that's when it is signed, also be illegal or not complete?
I think there was something. I think this is important to know. I think one of the things that's in the RFQ is it says that it's all subject to legislative appropriation. So I think even their own RFQ envisioned that the legislature is going to have to appropriate these funds. And I think that kind of gets to the meat of the whole argument is, you know, we think that the Constitution says that the legislature appropriates the funds, and this is nothing against the governor because I greatly respect him, and I want to work with the governor, and I hope that we can sit down together, and I'd love to hear his plan. I've looked at other states, and I see where you have in many of these states where the governor and the legislature are cooperating on plans to administer this money, and that's what I want to do is have a sit down with him and his staff and say, look, what do you think the program is to best get this money out? And here's what we can do to help appropriate those funds to these agencies and these groups. And then there will be some left over. I envision that once we get out of session in June, like we always do, that it will go to the governor and or the executive branch agencies for administration throughout the rest of the year.
Well, so when you start looking at this, have you honestly had those type of communications where you've been able to, not only with the lieutenant governor, but with the speaker and the appropriate chairman of the committees, had a chance to sit down visibly in the same office or maybe on teleconferencing on a regular basis and be in sync with the governor, or has that been lacking?
Well, I will say the governor and I spoke shortly before the legislature went back into session. We spoke maybe 2 weeks ago or so about some of the education funding. I think he and I agree wholeheartedly that we've got distance learning as a huge piece of this, that we need to make this come to reality, come to fruition. And I have had many, many, many meetings with the lieutenant governor and the speaker and other leaders in the chambers about the various actions that would need to be taken to help do this the right way. So, and Paul, look, I'm here to work. I love the work that I do. I'm proud to represent my area, and I'm willing to get to work to make this thing work. Yeah, I'm ready to get going.
I will say this, though. Never before in at least the last, I think, 8 or 10 years has the parents campaign, one of the most liberal organizations ever, who would do anything to protect the administration office of education and the funding. That's their number one priority. They are happy as they can be with the House and Senate, and that scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I'm just, look, my sole focus is less on any outside group. My focus is I know, because I've got my constituents and my friends and citizens of Mississippi that are calling, they're concerned, they're hurting, and I am sympathetic to those.
I understand.
Regardless of what all the people on the outside are saying, my main focus is let's do what we can. Let's get together, do what we can to make sure we're getting the relief to the people that need it the most in this state.
Briggs, thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much, and thanks for holding on.
Yeah, good to be.
Don't be a stranger. We'll get you back on. Come on.
Give me a call sometime. Hopefully it's under great circumstances. I look forward to hearing from you.